So today we want to talk about what does it really cost to sell a house in Birmingham, Alabama. So maybe you've heard a 6%, 8%. There's a typical range on what to expect, but today we're going to talk about actual real numbers so that you're prepared for selling your house.
We've done this a lot of times, and so we know how to estimate pretty well locally, whether it be for taxes and insurance, attorney's fees and title and so on. So let's talk about those. And we actually have a real life example that we'll be talking from. And this house closed right here in our favorite neighborhood in Bluff Park in Hoover, Alabama, just a few months ago. So these numbers are actually pretty accurate at the time of this recording.
Okay, so when we're talking about selling a house, we're not talking about just broad numbers. We're talking about every single expense that can chip away at the bottom line of what you're going to be taking away from that sale. So we want to go through every single one of those.
So this conversation we typically have in the very, very beginning with our sellers, because we can get a really good estimate. The one thing that we don't have that we're going to always depend on the sellers for is to give us a good estimate of the payoff. So it's your first mortgage, second mortgage, any other liens that you know of. If you have that information ready, what we'll do is factor all of these other pieces in order to give you a really solid net estimate. So it's your true walk away dollars once that sale has closed. And of course there's variables. So we've got some real numbers here, but depending on where you live, your property taxes may be higher or lower, or if depending on if you want to DIY some of the prep work and save some money, as opposed to just pay a trusted contractor to come in and do the work for you, right? So some of those costs are going to vary, but let's kind of go through those. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the big one that everybody, like that, the first one on the top of your mind, I know, is commission.
And so, people want to estimate, or they want to say, well, commission's going to be X. But here's the truth. Commission is negotiable every single time, case by case. And that should be across the land. Now, I will tell you what we've seen in working when we are on the buy side and when we're on the seller side. When we're looking on the other side of the table at the other agent, we've seen commissions between 2% and 7%. There's a wide variability there, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. So let's pull that out and start going through the actual costs of selling the house. And the first thing I think we need to think of is not just prepping the home, but let's do a pre-inspection.
And most people kind of feel like, I don't know, maybe they kind of feel like it's a waste of money because it's an extra expense, but it actually gives you a lot of information before you get ready to sell your house.
No, I think it's really wise to do that, and we've begun recommending that now. So what's the cost of an inspection? It's $400. And what's the inspector going to do? He's going to act like he's going to act like the buyer's inspector will act. He's going to be in the attic. He's going to be in the crawl space, in the basement, look at the foundation, the shingles, the windows, the appliance. He's going to look at everything. So you'll know what probably will come up when you have a buyer contract on your home and their inspector comes. So the beautiful part about that is you don't have to fix everything. You just want to be able to put a strategy around some things you want to repair and some things you want to take your chances on, right?
So the second thing that we like to prep our sellers with is the actual house prep. And so that can be outside. That means, like fixing the shutters and painting doors and those kinds of things. But also on the inside, making sure that you've decluttered the house, get those things out so that there's more space in the home, but also neutralizing. I like that word. But what that means is just like making sure it's got a fresh coat of paint, making sure that it's a neutral color, because you may love fuchsia, but your buyer might not, and so we want them to picture themselves there.
Okay, so and so there's a lot of variable costs there, and this is where we go back into saying if you're a DIY person, you might save a few bucks. If you're a person who says, I don't want to DIY, I don't want to think about it, then we've got trusted contractors that can help guide you down the road. And so you say maybe and possibly. In my opinion, I think it's almost every time. Like, it needs to have fresh pine straw. I mean, the curb appeal is so important. So the cost associated, it's going to be fresh pine straw. It's probably going to be a fresh coat of paint on the front door. In my opinion, every house is going to need a fresh coat of paint, and you may as well do that neutral, creamy white. Of course, every time we'll advise on the actual colors that we recommend.
Right.
But getting that house prepped is huge. The cost of that, but then also with the decluttering, which is a great point.
Yes.
We advise some of our sellers, hey, go down to your local storage and get a storage unit and just put stuff in there.
Right.
Just put it in boxes, because that'll make your house feel so much more bigger, wider, and open. So, maybe that's $100 or $150 a month for that storage, right?
Right.
Let's talk about staging for a second.
Yes.
So staging a house, some people think staging means moving furniture in, but what we think from a staging standpoint is staging is getting the house ready for pictures and for showing.
Right.
If you live in the house, that might be more of just decluttering.
Right.
And so we actually, again, some sellers are total DIYers. Some sellers are like, hey, do you have a person or a company, a design company that can come in and help us stage where we live? Absolutely.
Yes.
We can help you with both.
Yes.
And then if the house is empty, you can invest $3,000 to $5,000 in staging an empty house, and that can add 2 to 3 times that amount potentially in revenue in the sale, because the effectiveness of having a designer home basically ready to go.
Right. Okay, so now you've gone through the prep, you've gone through the staging, and you have a contract on your house. Now, what kind of money should you expect coming from this point forward?
Yeah. All right. So again, very market dependent. What I mean by that is, at the time of this recording, it is very customary for sellers, or I should say for buyers, to ask sellers for $2,000, $5,000, $7,000 in closing costs. And we've seen that, again, on both sides. We've seen that request, and we've seen sellers and give some of those closing cost concessions.
Right.
And so that is a cost in this market that you should factor in. Now, in 2021, if you were a seller, you didn't factor that in because it wasn't a factor.
Right.
But in a normal, healthy market, that now becomes a factor.
Yes.
So it's closing costs. And then the next thing is you're not going to pay for the buyer's inspection, and you're not going to pay for the buyer's appraisal. But when the buyer does an inspection, in a lot of cases, there's going to be a request for repairs.
Right.
And so there might be, depending on what you repaired or what you fixed in the pre-listing inspection, there might be a few more that you have to factor in here.
So not only do you have potential, or most likely some repair requests of some sort, maybe they're big, maybe they're small, depending on what you took care of ahead of time, but then there's also just the general closing costs that are going to be associated with any and every house. And those are things you're like title and attorney and those types of things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about just some pricing when it comes on.
Yeah, so just to help you understand how to estimate that, right now, Central Alabama, most attorneys are charging $1,200. What's customary is that the buyer pays for half, the seller pays for half. We typically estimate $600, and that may vary by $10 or $15 or $20 either way.
Right.
And then title costs. Okay, so the title costs can be title costs are really based on the value of the home. It's the cost of the title insurance policy, which is based on how, the insurance policy for a $150,000 home is not worth as much as the insurance policy on an $850,000 home.
Right.
So title costs will vary. I would say a great estimate is $700 to $1,400. Not out of the way. And again, we typically split those.
Right. And then you have home warranty.
Yep, you have a home warranty. We generally, most of the time, the buyer asks the seller for a home warranty, and that will mitigate some repairs not being done, some repairs that the buyer may not have asked for. The cost of a home warranty is, plus or minus $50 at about $800. So between $750 and $850, depending on the package.
Right.
Okay. We're getting close to the end.
Right.
If you're getting nervous, don't worry about it. We're getting close to the end.
Right.
The other two things here in Central Alabama that are very common are the buyer requesting for a termite bond, which basically is a termite contract. And almost every seller says to me, but I just renewed mine 6 months ago.
Right.
The way the real estate process works is the buyer's asking for a new 12-month contract, and the buyer requires a new termite inspection. The buyer pays for the inspection. The seller typically pays for the contract. And that's between $100 and $200. Okay, so after the termite, now we've got, typically, if you live in an HOA neighborhood, the attorney is going to require a letter from your HOA to basically declare that this house, this property is in good standing with the HOA. And then do you have to still pay property taxes, but not for the whole year.
Right.
Property taxes for the number of days this tax year that you've owned the home. And those will be prorated so that the buyer is responsible for property taxes for every day after the close of the sale.
Right. One other thing that we wanted to just keep in mind is it's not necessarily on your net sheet, but if you have moved out of the home, there are still expenses associated with it while it is still on the market. So if you have moved out and your home is empty or staged or whatever, you still are paying the mortgage for that house, the utilities for that house, HOA payments, all of those types of things. So just wanted to keep that in mind so that you factor in those costs alongside your new mortgage wherever you are at that time.
That's right. That's right. All right. So here is a look at a redacted closing settlement statement for a home that sold, as I mentioned earlier, just a few months ago, right here in Bluff Park in Hoover, Alabama. So let's talk about a few points on that. And again, we'll focus on, you can see the buyer and the seller side, but we're going to focus on the seller side only.
As you can see, there's lots of numbers on here. So we're not going to hit every single one of them, but we wanted you guys to know at least what one looks like if you've never purchased a home, or if you haven't purchased recently or sold recently, you kind of have an idea of what it looks like. So if you look on this one, you can see the seller credit. The sale of the property was $385,000. If you go down for prorations, for taxes, you can see, as we talked about earlier, it's prorated based on how long the seller's been in the home versus when the new year starts. So in this case, it's $94. In this one, you can see to the left that the payoff, so remember the cost of the house was $385,000, but what the seller still owed was $166,700 and something dollars. You can see also that the commissions broke down, $13,000 and $9,000 for listing and selling agents.
And then you've got the half of the title of that $487.50, and then half of the title exam fee, the lender's policy, and then the owner's policy. And let's explain those for a quick minute. If it's a cash sale, and you get title insurance, that really just refers to one policy. That is the owner's title policy that protects the new buyer, the new owner. But whenever there's a lender, not only does there need to be a protection of the buyer, but there needs to be a protection to the mortgage company.
Right.
And so there are actually two policies when the buyer is purchasing with a lender.
So this is a great example of just what it would look like on a net sheet when you're getting ready to sell a home. And we wanted you guys to have a picture of that so that you understood kind of what the numbers looked like in a real life example.
So again, this is just to help the personalities out there like me, because I'm a planner. I don't like surprises. But the takeaway is every time we sit down with a potential seller, once we figure out what the market value for the home likely is, we will run through these numbers very specific to that seller.
Right. So we wanted you guys to be completely prepared when you are getting ready to sell a home. We don't want anything to blindside you, come out of nowhere and make you worried or nervous about selling your home. So that's what we do. We sit down and we have conversations and we help you to know exactly what's going to take place. That's what we specialize in. So if you have any questions about purchasing or selling a home in Birmingham, Alabama, reach out to us. We are Mike and Brandy Brown with Keller Williams. You can reach us by phone at 205-368-5995 or info@mbrownrealty.com.